Hello and welcome back to From the Top, our Metacritic Countdown podcast. I'm joined by Michael and Steve, and today we're talking about the third game on the list, which is Grand Theft Auto 4. This is actually tied for second place with Tony Hawk's because they both have a 98 Metacritic score. It was released in 2008 by Rockstar, and it is the 11th entry in the series, but the first on PlayStation 3.
The 11th?
I know,
It has a 4 on it, though.
Yeah. I was actually a bit like, wait, I couldn't be bothered to look up all the other games because I counted them on my fingers, and I was like, okay, we got GTA 1, GTA 2, GTA London, or whatever that was called.
Yeah.
Then 3 Vice City San Andreas, but then you have Liberty City Stories, Vice City Stories. I think there was a DS one, Chinatown Wars. And there's a bunch of other ones like just thrown in there. So I think if you count all those, it works out to be the 11th.
One made for a Nokia or some shit like that.
Probably, yeah.
Probably what? Yeah, Jesus.
But yeah, so this game, it's everybody I'm sure is familiar with Grand Theft Auto. It's an open world kind of action adventure game. What's funny about that? That's what it is.
I don't know. It's just weird to think of it as like.
I know. Yeah.
Well,
I guess you would just call it an open world game.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's crazy.
World,
they set the standard for open world games with 3, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's pretty much the Grand Theft Auto genre at this stage. Yeah.
And like 3, this one returns to Liberty City, although it's a brand new map, completely built from the ground up. The game itself was built from a new engine by Rockstar's own Rage engine, and it was a massive leap in graphics, technology, the works. Of course, it was a leap in generations. It was the first PlayStation 3 entry. So yeah, this game third on the list, which was a bit surprising, I think, even though I think we could all agree it is an amazing game. But does it deserve to be third on the list?
Could we all agree that it's an amazing game?
Well, we'll get to that.
I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay. But I mean,
Calm down, lads.
you got to take in every aspect of like why it's there. Do you know what I mean? Not just do you like the game or the gameplay or whatever.
We're going to put on our very serious critic hats.
Exactly.
Don't let personal emotions come into it, guys.
I think
Mine has a pineapple in it.
I think an obvious like comparison to it is Grand Theft Auto 5, and we will talk about the differences between them and stuff, because I would have expected Grand Theft Auto 5 to be higher, but we'll get to that. First of all, what is both of you, Michael and Steve, what are your experiences with the game? Did you play it when it first released? Have you played it since then? And what also off the back of that, what were your first impressions of the game?
Jesus, throwing all the questions at us.
I know, I'm going to show up for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, Sean Snoozetown there.
No, Michael.
Michael, please take it seriously.
That sounds like such a disparaging, like, Michael, stop with the jokes now. This is serious.
I got it when it came out, the day it came out, because I was like hugely...
Midnight launch. You're camping outside. Ma'am, can I please have it?
Little mittens. My mom brings me down my dinner. It's like GameStop. I got it pretty much when it came out because I was like a massive fan of the 3 Vice City and San Andreas. I got it, and like it was a bit of a rude awakening when I got it for the first time, because you go into this having played those 3 preceding games, which were like, they obviously set the standard for open world games, and they were big fun games. Like, the big things that changed between 3 Vice City and San Andreas is they added more, and they added more vehicles, more fun weapons, car customization, like big characters, big maps. Like, San Andreas had 3 cities and a mountain. Like, that was huge back then. So the expectations for 4 were massive. And you go into it and it's like, it's a pretty downbeat game. Like, it's sort of somber in some ways. I'm going to get into it later. This will probably come up how sometimes that tone doesn't work with other elements in the game, but in comparison, it's very sort of like, you know, muted. It's even in the like color scheme. It's got this sort of brown or grey filter over everything, which was like typical of games during the PS3, Xbox 360 era. In this case, I sort of think it suits the game in a way, because it's got that sort of atmosphere that it's going for. It's meant to be telling a quote unquote serious story, but Yeah, definitely the first time I got it, I was sort of like, this, why aren't I jumping out of helicopters and like launching bombs and stuff like that? Whereas like you're doing a mission where like you're picking up a guy, you know?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think they kind of tried to go in a little bit of a different direction with 4. Like everybody, like you said, had such high anticipation for it, but it was more grounded in a way. And I think, like in retrospect, I think it was the right decision to make because they had to tone like reel the series back in a bit because it was just going to go down like a Saints Row route almost, you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing of seeing like a fork in the road as like Saints Row went to crazy. If San Andreas just kept getting crazier and crazier, that's where it would end up in Saints Row 4 where you're like the president and you're launching nukes and like you're fighting aliens and shit like that. Whereas I think like throughout this game I always got the impression that Rockstar wanted it to be like a HBO series or something like that. Serious teams and people curse and there's sex and, you know, there's violence and there's betrayal and it's gritty and it's trying to say things about American life and society. And I know I'm sounding disparaging, like it's. I think it does some things better than others in that respect, but it was definitely a big change.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Just one thing before I jump to you, Steve. I just about the color and stuff. I did think that fitted really well because it was like New York. It was meant to be gritty and grey,
and it's set in autumn anyway, so that sort of aesthetic of it, like I think it was grey skies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it was one of the games that it really did work with, and also it kind of reflects like the main character and his story and stuff. But anyway, Steve,
no, I think that's true.
Yeah. I just don't want to dive too deep too quick. But Steve, what were your experiences with the game and first impressions?
So for me, Grand Theft Auto is a series that I never really got into in any way. I don't think there's a single one of them I've ever finished. So I didn't play this on release, but I do remember a lot of people who did pick it up, yourself included, Michael. I remember hearing from most of those people that they were pretty unimpressed by it because it just wasn't what they were expecting. Now, what you were saying, Sean, about how it kind of takes a bit of a left turn and like, you, Michael, there, you're saying it's a bit of a left turn and it goes in a different direction. After you said that, I'm like, actually, it might have been a really good idea to do that considering the direction they went afterwards with GTA 5. But so I never really played it at the time. I picked it up for the podcast and like on Steam, and I played, I'd say probably not even halfway through. I got up to, what was the point? Do you know the character Playboy X and his friend comes out of prison?
Yeah.
And he's looking after. Yeah, so I got up to around that point. And it's a tricky one because like there's bits of it that I don't like, but I think that's just my reaction to the series as a whole because I don't really like Grand Theft Auto anyway. And some bits that I also like think, well, that was a dumb decision, kind of work in its favor because one thing I think it seems to do well, and I don't know if this applies to the entire game because I've only played about half of it, but the story seems really good. Like you said, like it's kind of a HBO kind of like a tier serious story, like trying to say something quite significant as opposed to what Grand Theft Auto 5 seems to be, which is just a big open fun playground. Again, haven't played that one, so I don't really know if that's the case.
I think, personally for me, like the story, I like the direction it like. I think this is one of the first times where there's been like it was a revenge story, so to speak. There's no need to go into too much detail for people that haven't played it, but I think what was really what was different about it too, like past GTAs as well, is that for one, you were like an immigrant coming into the United States and you were completely alone. Like you didn't really know anybody there. You had your cousin Roman, was it? Or Roman? But that was pretty much it. You didn't know anybody else. You were like starting from the bottom. And most Grand Theft Auto games, you start from the bottom and work your way up. But you have connections. You're like, you know people and stuff.
I think most of the others start with you being betrayed. Yeah. And you have to start from the bottom and fight your way back to the top. Yeah. Whereas this one, it's like, you're a nobody coming in off a boat, really. Yeah.
I think actually it's just thinking now, like it's kind of similar to like Tommy Vercetti in Vice City because he just showed up in Vice City, like he didn't know anyone there and stuff, but he was still like had connections and he wasn't like completely unknown and stuff, whereas like Nico Bellic I think was like a really like the United States was alien to him and stuff. Do you know?
I think that's an interesting choice to make because it gives it a good opportunity for a foreign perspective on America. And like watching the game definitely tries to do, and the series in some ways tries to do, is satirize American society and culture.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So it does it through this character having like an outsider's perspective. So it's all about like the American dream being a sham, and like I guess post 9/11 anxiety as well to a certain extent. Some parts of that work for me, and some parts really don't work.
Yeah.
Like one thing I'm going to have to bring up is the dreaded L word. Ludonarrative dissonance. That's 2 words, Michael.
It's like, there's lesbians in this?
That's for like, it's this overused term that's basically when a character's story or themes sort of doesn't work when with the gameplay. So a common example is Uncharted, where Nathan Drake's this happy smiling guy, and then like he kills like 500 people throughout the game and doesn't even feel it.
I think if you tried to play the game the way you think Nico would play the game, it would be really, really dull.
Yeah.
But like I think it just, one scene in particular really shows how like these two sides of Grand Theft Auto don't work together, because like on one hand they want to tell this serious story and they want to, you know, have some realistic elements to it and like deal with like some heavy themes, and on the other side like there's a very juvenile sense of humor going throughout the whole game. So there's one cutscene where you're doing a mission like halfway through the game and you're meeting a police officer or a former police officer on a pier, so by the water. And it's a pretty serious like cutscene. You know, Nico's being threatened by this guy, but he has to get drawn into doing more violent work by a police officer, and this guy has information on him, and it's sort of tense. But the camera pans around and there's a sign for a restaurant in the background called the Poop Deck. So like these two things like really don't work together, and they clash awkwardly at times.
Yeah.
That was my feeling throughout the game. But at other times they really do nail that sort of aspect of it. There's certain missions in the game, and I think I won't spoil them, but they tie into the revenge thing where, you know, they go for a more serious tone and it really works.
Yeah, totally. Just moving on from the story, in terms of gameplay, what did you guys think on it? Because obviously this was a completely new engine. It was, I suppose at the time, like one of the most advanced and biggest games on the 11th gen, possibly.
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
And I think a lot of people have a lot of things to say about the gameplay, specifically the driving.
Yeah. When was that fucking albatross going to be brought up? Yeah.
But also like everything was overhauled, you know, like the gunplay, just the general movement of your character and stuff. There was a heavy reliance on ragdoll physics in the game. So yeah, I mean, personally, I think I'll just give my own thoughts on it first before moving on to you, Steve. I think the driving was definitely something that took a long time to get used to.
Yeah,
and I think the what am I trying to say here? Sorry, getting all muddled up.
That's okay. The ragdoll.
No. Just on the driving, I think there's like kind of a split in the fan base between who like it and don't.
Definitely,
and for me, at first, I was like, "Fucking hell!" Like this is all over the place. Like, you know, you're it's like you're driving on ice. Was kind of like
you swing around a corner and like you're in a lamppost straight away.
Totally, but once you. And for me, like this was definitely the case. If you nail the driving in it, it's like really satisfying when you're able to just like skirt around the city like effortlessly, you know. But for some people, it just like they just couldn't get it or like didn't care, and it was just an annoying part of the game. And then so I mean, so Steve, what were your impressions on the driving?
Yeah, so I can see where you'd be coming from, how this would divide people, because like. Yeah, you can kind of compare to like we were talking about difficulty in games, and like if you kind of approach this as like this is something I have to master, it probably could be really satisfying. But the thing is, and like the issue that I have with it is I don't see Grand Theft Auto games as uber difficult games. Like you hear the word sandbox and you kind of think it's a game to mess around in. So like I don't really want to be like trying to master the controls. Like I just want to be like going in and having fun and enjoying it. And like I think the gunplay like nails it. I think like the gunplay in this is fantastic. I really like a lot of that. But the amount of mission, like I was playing this for quite a while, but it was what mission was it? There was a mission where you have to chase a train through the city, and I tried so many fucking times to finish this mission.
Grand Theft Auto doesn't have a good track record with train missions.
Yeah.
Track record? Oh my god! I just
oh, drop the mic. No. Yeah, no, like, but it's just like it was so frustrating to me. Like, I think if this was a game that I planned on sinking a ton of hours into, I could probably get to where you were at, Sean, where it was like, yes, I pulled off that like skid perfectly and rounded that corner fantastic, but it never got to that point for me, and I sank about 20 hours into it. So
that's fair enough. No. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was for some people it was an annoyance, for others it was kind of something to master, you know. I think like what they sorry, I will ask you Michael, as well. I think like they tried to go down, it's weird, almost like, I guess hyper-realistic route is kind of the right term, because they wanted the cars to like move like suspensions and all that to feel realistic, but at the same time it was almost like Hollywood realistic, like, do you know, with cars like skidding around corners and stuff, do you know, which like obviously wouldn't happen, but and then just moving on from that, like with Grand Theft Auto 5, they obviously heard all the player backlash and feedback, and they toned it down a bit. It's still kind of, you can feel that it's the same engine or whatever, but it's definitely toned down a lot more.
It's a lot easier to drive around in Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah.
But maybe less satisfying as a result, because one thing, when you brought up the point of it's satisfying to master the driving in 4, it means that when you're in a chase mission getting away from the cops and like you nail every corner, it looks like a proper and feels like a proper chase scene.
Yeah.
Not like in Grand Theft Auto 5 where like you crash 5 times and you still get away.
Yeah, and that's one. Yeah, I definitely prefer the driving in 4 actually. When I remember playing 5 for the first time, I was like, oh, this is really like muted, so how it felt, you know.
One of my favorite set pieces, this was like, it wasn't a set piece per se, but it was kind of like came out naturally through gameplay, was I had this massive end of Blues Brothers style like police pile up with about 20 cop cars like on top of me, and even though like it caused me to fail a mission I tried like a whole bunch of times, I was still like, that was awesome. That was fantastic.
Yeah, you do get cool moments like that. And another cool thing that comes about because of the physics engine and the handling is one of the greatest glitches ever in a game. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, Steve, but there's a certain swing set in a playground in one of the boroughs in Grand Theft Auto 4. And if you reverse your car just the right way into it, it would launch it across the map. And I know me and Sean and our flatmate used to just like literally spend hours driving to this place and launching ourselves from it. And like not even playing the main missions, just we'd play enough of the game that we can get to this playground, and then we'd just like mess around with that.
Just try to get as far
I want
as
to
you
go back
can.
to do that now. Shit.
But what did you think of the driving, Michael, in general?
I probably fall more into Steve's side of things, as in I did find it frustrating, and I'm not there to learn very complicated systems. I do admire them going down that route, and it does like tie into the game in general, into, you know, they were trying to be more realistic with a lot of things throughout the game, and trying to be more grounded and real. So having the cars, you know, swing around a bit and being like a you know, a bucking bronco that you have to control sometimes makes it more gritty and realistic, and that's cool. I get it. Fine, guys, you've watched Sopranos. I get it. But in reality, like Steve, it just led to a lot of frustration, to be honest. And you can see there is like a vocal minority of people who definitely think they downgraded in Grand Theft Auto 5. But I'd say the majority probably prefer the change.
Yeah, I think it's better for the majority of players basically in 5. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question there, Sean? So like this, obviously now, like it's very obvious to me at least that you have a lot of love for this game. Do you prefer this over Grand Theft Auto 5?
I would say yes. Probably a big reason. I've played it more than 5 is the thing. So I'd say that's why. And also there's a bit of a nostalgic factor as well, because I remember like playing the shit out of this when it came out, and I never owned 5. I only played it at like friends' houses and stuff. I put in more with 4, and to be honest, I kind of preferred like the gritty setting of New York and stuff as well to LA. But yeah, there's a bunch of small reasons like that as to why I prefer it. But I think overall 5 is probably a better game because it's like, because of how like it toned or not toned things down, it like tamed things really for the general public, and it was a bigger map and there was more options and stuff like that.
I sort of feel like whatever the creative spirit that created the more realistic elements in 4, that sort of vibe or that sort of energy went into the Red Dead series, because that got more grounded and realistic with Red Dead 2, and Grand Theft Auto went more of a like mass appeal sort of
totally
vibe. But this is like the first, because like Red Dead 2, and we'll be talking about this game in a few weeks, I'd say, but Red Dead 2, you know, people are like, it's a very slow-paced game, it's a lot more grounded, you know, realistic in some ways, and you can definitely see the beginning of that in Grand Theft Auto 4.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just want to throw like a theory here, and this is just like, I don't really know the answer to this. You guys have played this a lot more, so you know this a lot better than me. So like, you guys seem to have made like a couple of allowances for the game, like along the lines of like, oh yeah, it's a very murky brown grey, which we don't usually forgive a lot of PS3 games or Xbox 360 games, because we're like, that was just like typical of that time. But here you're like, oh, but it suits the setting and the story. And same with like the driving and like that kind of thing, because, oh, again, it's more grounded, so it suits the story. If the story was bad, do you think this game would work at all?
You see, I'm the one who made a lot of those allowances you're talking about, and I do have to, like, it's almost me acknowledging that I can see where they were coming from with a lot of these decisions, because they all tie into a more grounded tone and atmosphere, and that's one thing I think the game excels at, is atmosphere. I'm not necessarily sure that the story works overall in certain ways. So
really?
Yeah, like there's certain elements that I think are great, but like I was saying before, there's that sort of clash of like some of the Grand Theft Auto games have just really bad writing. Like characters get into a room and talk to each other, and you can tell they've all been written by the same person. They don't have their own voices. They all just swear and make weird pop culture references in this alternate world, and then like they all have some weird backstory where they're all like secretly perverts or something like that. So I'm not sure it all works necessarily, but it's interesting to see a game that takes these risks and decides, you know what, we are going to put a fucking brown filter over everything, and we're going to make the cars like handle like shopping trolleys, and we're going to have like realistic damage and ragdoll physics and stuff like that. You can see like a definite creative aim on it, whereas like something like Grand Theft Auto 5 or like some other big AAA games, it's sort of like, oh, what'll everyone like, you know? So I can admire it for those reasons. Does it make me want to run out and play it again? No. Does it make it the third best game of all time? I don't know really, but it's got like a definite artistic stamp on it, is the only thing I'll say about it.
For me, I think the points you were making, Steve, about like the driving and the color filters and stuff, like I think they stand by themselves apart from the story. Like for me, I the story was all right, but it didn't blow me away either. You know, I didn't think like, wow, this is like the best story in a video game ever, or even in Grand Theft Auto, you know. Like I did like Nico Bellic as a character, and the story was interesting, but it wasn't the standout point for me, I think. I like I said earlier, I really think the color scheme like suited the city more so. Like when you're driving down like near Times Square and Central Park, or you know what they're mimicked as, like it feels like, oh, this is what New York is like, even though I've never been there.
Do you know what's funny?
Like, from films and stuff, you know, I
actually went to New York not too long after playing this game.
Weird flex, but okay.
I know, yeah. But that is one thing I thought. I was like, and it's such a like a guy who just stays in his basement and plays games, and he's sort of like, wow, this is like this is like Warcraft when you step outside. But it felt like, wow, okay, they nailed the feeling of New York, and it's hard to describe, but like they did sort of get that feeling across, I have to say.
Maybe the story isn't what I mean then. Like maybe it's like the driving and like the color scheme and all that. Maybe what I mean is like it serves the tone and atmosphere as opposed to the story. So like if they hadn't got, actually I was going to say like if it didn't have a good atmosphere, but this all feeds into the atmosphere, so you can't really separate them, I suppose.
But like, what is a good atmosphere? I guess it's sort of like if a game in like all its systems and stuff points towards a singular goal in an atmosphere, is that a good thing? Like the Dark Souls games, which we bring up in every podcast for some reason, but like they all their systems seem to gear towards having this oppressive atmosphere with like rays of sunshine where you succeed, and that's very satisfying. But like Bubsy 3D has a colourful atmosphere with sarcastic lines and all like that, and that's annoying, but it all gears towards the same thing. So I guess should we be giving it marks for like having that sort of dedication to its tone? Maybe, I don't know.
I think when it comes to the driving, we're probably looking into it a bit too much as well, because this was like, the driving could have gone like a few different ways, you know, and it wouldn't really have affected like the story or the tone or the game or anything too much. I think it was just, here's a new engine, guys. We need to come up with a new driving engine for it as well. What do we do? And they tried to go down this like Hollywood realistic route, and some people liked it, some people didn't. But I don't think it has. I think we're looking at it too much as if like, does this work with the setting and the story and stuff? Because it's just a driving mechanic.
Yeah, but it's all part of the one thing, though. It's not like you can separate like the shooting and say, well, the shooting was 10 out of 10, so I love the game. It's sort of like it's all part of the one experience.
No, yeah, totally. But I don't know if it relates that much to like the
tone of thing. Well, no. I think I agree with you there, Sean. Like it might not influence like the tone so much, but because you spend like it's in the title, it's Grand Theft Auto. You spend a huge amount of time driving. So like the fact that like the main mechanic, for me personally, like I didn't really enjoy it. Like that's seriously hampered. And like you can enjoy this game like as like there was a point where I was like, the driving is annoying me. Maybe I'll just walk for a bit, but like it takes forever to walk anywhere. So like,
you're mental.
Yeah, I know. This
is there a bus I can get?
You get a train, can't you? In this game,
you can actually. Yeah,
you can get the train. Yeah. But it's just like it makes no sense to do that because the city is so huge. But like you do also run into random people on the streets sometimes, and like get like. I think very early on, I bumped into someone who was like high off their face, who just said like, "Hey, buddy, you're my new best friend," and they gave me like $100 for no reason. And I was like, "That's a nice little touch in this game," and like it's again feeding into what you're saying, Sean, that like they do really nail the tone. Like I do think that it's got a very good tone, but the problem for me is that it's clashing with like the Grand Theft Auto like playbook, which is all about fun, super, yay. So like,
yeah.
That was a weird element. But we're being like somewhat negative about the game. But there's one like plus point that I just wanted to bring up out of nowhere, and it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about. But this game has the best theme song of any game
100%.
ever written. It is sick.
No, I don't know any game ever.
Name one.
But definitely
name 10.
Definitely the best Grand. Definitely the best Grand. It's a sick theme tune.
Sorry, I'm on your side, man.
No. It's a sick theme tune, and it's like the best of the Grand Theft Autos. Definitely.
Yeah, it sums up the themes and the vibe of the game so well, and like it's got a sick bass line in it. And I remember seeing back in the day that I was on the MySpace page for the guy who composed the theme song, and he had it up, and John Williams commented on it. John Williams, who like composed all the Star Wars composition or soundtracks and all like that, and he said, "This is a really good song. I think you've got a future in the industry." And your man replied saying, "Yeah, that's amazing." Now, This is MySpace back in the day, so that mightn't have been John Williams that actually said that. Like, who fucking knows? There's definitely a guy with a beard and glasses in the profile
John Williams
picture.
at limewire.com.
Yeah, Darth Maul was his fucking profile picture.
But it's such a good theme song, and I think the radio, the soundtrack on the radio, like the licensed soundtrack, is really good as well.
Yeah.
Again, they went in a different direction because Vice City and San Andreas had like very time specific ones. Like you had an 80s one and a 90s one, respectively, and they were amazing. But this has to have like a contemporary one, and it's sick. Like it's really, really good. You got like, it's so diverse as well. You got like Simian Mobile Disco, Major Lazer, Nas, Miles Davis, Aphex Twin, Chic, Sepultura, Tin Lizzy, The Rapture, like all these like really, really cool bands.
I mean, that's no, like GTA games are no stranger to having a sick soundtracks. I mean, they always get like shitloads of licensed music and stuff.
I guess they can throw so much money at. I didn't find the radio as entertaining as I had been in Vice City and Tree.
No.
I don't know why that is, but
they did have Steve. They did have Laszlo in it again, which is great. But I think he had like before he was he was in all the he was in GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas. I think he was in San Andreas. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah,
but he was usually like a host on like
a chat show.
Was it a chat show or was he a host on like a music station? But then in 4 he was actually a chat show host. In
Tree and Vice City he was definitely
okay.
At least in Tree he was like, because I remember like guys that call in and be saying weird shit in Tree. Like I used to, when I was playing Grand Theft Auto 3 for the first time, just drive around listening to the radio.
Yeah, it was so good,
which is crazy for a game.
Anyway, sorry, a bit of a tangent there. Steve, what were you going to say?
Also, like I wish that I had played like the Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 version, because the Steam version actually doesn't have a lot of the licensed music on it.
Oh, of course.
So like the radio that I was listening to was pretty abysmal, I have to say. Like the talk shows bit were okay, but it didn't, like, I'd heard people say that like it's crucial for like every Grand Theft Auto game, but I was like, eh. And that also brings up another point. Like there's a lot of like new gimmicky things that this game brings in, and one that I really want to talk about because I want to get your guys' opinions on is like the dates and like the phone call text messages. Like
let's go bowling.
I'm actually kind of divided. For the most part I didn't like it, but there's times where it suited the tone of the game, and it's this argument again. It was tone versus gameplay, you know. It was like, this very much feeds into the idea you're in this big city that like all these like wheels are moving and you have to kind of like commit to certain people at certain times. But also I kind of felt like it was a bit pointless and like it distracted from the main gameplay loop. It'd be like imagine I was playing Donkey Konga and halfway through I had to stop to give bananas to Donkey Kong.
He did it again. How does he fucking keep doing it? I didn't see that one coming at all. But yes, Steve, it does. It is like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I hated all that shit, to be honest. Just because like especially like the stuff with Roman and that, it's like, no, I don't want to do, like, I want to go and shoot people or whatever, you know. I want to like carry on with the missions. And it was, wasn't it the thing, Steve, that if you didn't do the thing when they were asking you, then they got like angry at you or something?
Yeah, so like each character like gives you a little perk if you like keep them happy. So the only one I can remember off the top of my head was Roman, who can send a taxi for you at anywhere in the city if you want it. But if he's like unimpressed with you or like doesn't have any respect for you, you can't do that. So like that's not a big deal. It's more the fact that you just see a little thumbs down next to their name honestly makes you feel shit, because like obviously, like you, Sean, I didn't want to do any of this stuff. I just wanted to get on with the game. But I felt horrible being like, no, I don't have time for this. Like, because just like, oh, well, people are disappointed in me now. Probably
Yeah.
not seeing the point of Grand Theft Auto, like if that's how I feel. But
Yeah, I think it would have been fine if you could do it whenever you wanted to, but not like you have to do it now or that's it.
Yeah.
This is your chance to do it.
But again, it's tying into like
Yeah.
realism, I guess,
True.
and they refined and like it has like a big overarching thing I'd say about Grand Theft Auto 4 is it has its rough edges, but they're sort of the interesting points of it sometimes as well. Like they call you at the worst time, like you're driving across the map to a mission and like you haven't fucking time to go bowling or bring someone out on a date, and then when you do, like I'm probably like ye where I did it the first few times with someone, and then you're like, it just takes so long, and it's not like any of these mini games are that fun either.
Yeah.
But like it is sort of, it's in some ways admirable. I might be just trying to throw them a bone, but it's admirable that they went down this route because the amount of different voice lines you can get when you call up someone is amazing. Like if you call them in the middle of the night, they'll say, "Oh, I was trying to sleep. Call me another time." And every character has a different sort of sleep schedule. Like they'll be like, "Call me back at 8," or someone will be like, "No, I'm sleeping in. Call me back at noon." You know, like that sort of attention to detail, like, is sort of a hallmark of the Grand Theft Auto games. And it makes it like a bit more immersive, the whole dating friendship side of things. But yeah, most of it was pretty boring. I think one weird thing is that you could go. Am I right in saying this? You could go and watch a stand-up set, like a stand-up comedian set.
Ricky Gervais.
And Ricky Gervais was one of them. And there's some other famous comedian. I can't remember who, but it was like a complete set by them, or like a 10-minute section out of their comedy routine, and they'd have like a 3D model of the guy going around saying, "What's up with airline food?" and shit like that. That classic joke.
Like this game, like it does a really good job of again setting the tone, but like so much to its detriment. Like the amount of stuff you can do that doesn't feed into the main game at all is staggering. Like you can, like, there's one thing in your apartment, you can sit down and watch TV.
Yeah.
What's the point of that? Like, when you can just watch TV.
Yeah, but I mean, but that's like the beauty of Grand Theft Auto games, isn't it? The freedom, you know, to do whatever you want. Like you don't have to. It doesn't have to tie into the main story.
I do agree, but I'd argue that the stuff like TV. Excuse me, the stuff like TV. It's like Steve said, you can watch TV, but I can't go out and steal a car and, you know, blow it up and steal a helicopter and do all that stuff.
Well, you could.
What's stopping me?
Work out more, you could.
If I really believed. But yeah, you want to do the more wish fulfillment stuff rather than, you know, like fucking masturbate in the shower or whatever.
But I think
That's wish fulfillment for me. I've been having problems.
I think
The shower doesn't work.
I think having stuff like sit down and watch the TV like there isn't a detriment to it. You know, it's just like, here's like nobody's going to do it, but it's just like, oh cool, I can like sit down on the couch. You know, like I'm playing Cyberpunk at the moment, just to throw that out there. But like you can sit down in your apartment as well, or you can go to sleep in your apartment. But like I don't think anybody's going to do either of those things unless they actually had to. Do you know what I mean?
No, that's fair.
Like, yeah, it doesn't like detract from the game, but you could also be like, you could have saved like someone a lot of time.
Exactly, that's
like,
what I think as well. Yeah.
Get the game out faster or improve another aspect of the game. Like, so why? This is just kind of a case of like, and so many games are guilty of this, where they just want to cram as much stuff as possible into the game just to say they have it, so they can just slap it like on the reviews or on the box art saying like, oh yeah, and you can do this as well. Like, so many games are afraid to say like, you can do this in our game and it does this really, really well, and that's it. Like, they have to have everything in it.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more prevalent as the years go on, is that games, like, if you're releasing a big budget game now, it has to be like either an Uncharted clone or a big open world, and you have to tick all of those boxes, really. Like, if you had a game, like, you don't see a lot of games coming out where it's like LA Noire, where it's like a big open world but there's nothing to do. really. Like that's probably a flaw of that game, in fairness, but it sort of works in some ways because that's a better detective game than it is like an open world game.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it seems like why even bother having an open world in some of those cases?
Well, for LA Noire, I would just argue that it's like the backdrop. You know, it's to make
Fair.
it feel more realistic, I guess. You know,
And it might be better than it just being like tight corridors all the time and
yeah. And
stuff
I think like bit of a tangent now, but that is like I remember thinking this is crazy in LA Noire that like there's this they went into the effort of making this massive city and like you won't see half of it probably. Do you know what I mean? Unless you like go out of your way to drive around it, but like there's nothing driving you to do that.
I think the only thing in Eleanor was you could collect. There was some random, like burglaries or robberies that would be happening, and you could catch the criminals. And there was also cars that you could collect as well.
That was it.
But yeah, there was very little driving you to experience the open world. But I guess like everyone plays these games differently. Some people just like drive straight through the missions and like want to see the story, and other people just like mess around and reverse into a swing set over and over again just so it'll launch them across the map.
Yeah.
Man, I really want to do that.
One thing actually, well, a few other things just to mention about GTA 4. The expansion packs for it were actually, the DLC was actually very good.
Yeah.
There was the Ballad of Gay Tony and then
The Lost and the Damned.
The Lost and the Damned. They were both actually like really well received as well.
Fix the driving.
No, the driving was the same, Steve. But no, it was just extra story content where you played as like two different characters in each one. But the stories in them were actually in some regards better than the main story.
I really enjoyed both of those, like because there were shorter experiences as well, and they weren't quite as serious, and sort of in some ways the story is a little depressing in Grand Theft Auto 4. Not that you can't have a game story like that, but maybe it doesn't work in a Grand Theft Auto game. So they were a bit more fun in some, like especially the Ballad of Gay Tony, and The Lost and the Damned was just like a really good, like you're a biker and it sort of ties into that whole biker thing. Like you even had like a mechanic where you could do a little convoy with your other biker guys, so you're driving around as a group sort of thing.
Yeah, that was cool. One of the other things I just wanted to bring up about it was that this was, I believe, the introduction of GTA Online came with Grand Theft Auto 4.
Oh, okay.
The first iteration of it anyway. And this is kind of, it was like towards the end of the game's like life cycle anyway, like, you know, kind of leading up to, what year did Red Dead come out? 2010?
Red Dead 1?
Yeah.
I think it was that, yeah.
Yeah, so because Red Dead 1 had the online aspect as well, and they kind of built them up in parallel, but I think it really started with GTA 4. And that brought in a lot of like new players to the series and stuff as well, just who wanted that online experience. And then obviously with Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead, they kind of just ran with that, Rockstar, and that seems to be their main thing now, is just the online aspect.
GTA Online makes so much money for them. It's insane at this point.
That's probably the main reason why we don't have a GTA 6 yet.
Yeah, just because they're sitting back and just adding expansions. Like there was zero story DLC for Grand Theft Auto 5 as a result of this. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, that was another thing I was going to bring up, that, yeah, like GTA 4 was the last Grand Theft Auto, even though there's only been one since then, but there's been no DLC for GTA 5 in terms of story content and stuff.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think, first, before we move on, does anybody else have anything else to say about the gameplay or like any aspect like that stood out to you?
Well, one thing I wanted to bring up was, and again, like Steve pointed out, we're seeing this constant clash between the tone and story with like the open world and funner aspects. And one thing I wanted to mention was most of the missions in this game are sort of boring, I would say. Like a lot of them are, and they're pretty like grounded and realistic, like something you'd see in a prestige TV show, but like it's drive to the mission marker, you get a cutscene, like this guy threatens Nico and he's like, okay, I gotta do the crime, I guess. And so he goes and you drive with this character to another location. There's another cutscene. You shoot a guy. You drive the character back to where he was meant to go, and that's the end of the mission. It's sort of like, there's probably story stuff happening, but like mechanically, that's as much as it got. But there's one exception, which is excellent, which is the bank heist, Tree Leaf Clover, it's called. That
I
mission.
haven't got that far, damn.
Sorry to ruin it on you, Steve.
No, shoot, go ahead. No, I want to hear about it.
But there's this whole sort of, it's part of the main story, but it's almost like a side thing in some ways. But you help plan and carry out a heist. And so you have some missions of preparation leading up to it, and then you have the mission itself, Tree Leaf Clover, which is great. It's like, it starts in the bank and you're holding up the hostages and something goes wrong and you have to escape and the police come, and then you have this shootout which goes throughout the streets and eventually goes down into a subway and ends with you having to come out of the subway and outrun the police in a chase. And it's really exciting and dynamic and uses the city really well because you're shooting through the streets and you have to find a way out, and then it uses the subway, which like hardly ever gets used in the rest of the game. And it's also like a lot of Grand Theft Auto missions, very influenced by movies. So in this case, the movie Heat by Michael Mann. That was like the highlight of the game, and it's something that they definitely brought forward into Grand Theft Auto 5 because that whole game is based around heists. None of them are really as cool as this one, I think. They're a lot more elaborate, but Grand Theft Auto 5 had a lot more problems in it, and we won't get into that. But yeah, it was that was like the high point of the game for me. The rest of the game was like a little grey, a little bland. Maybe that was probably by design, so this like excitement is like a peak, but yeah, didn't work overall. But that mission, Tree Leaf Clover, was sick.
I suspect so yeah, I think I'd probably agree with you because very few of the missions engaged me whatsoever, but there was like one or two exceptions, and like the common thread that I see with all of them are the ones that like the longer I could do, like shootouts. It was basically shootouts were the best ones. And so often like the mission was never like an actual shootout. It was more a case of shoot this one guy and he's usually running from you, which is just annoying. And I really didn't enjoy that. The one mission that I really enjoyed, and I think it's because I had to play through it about 5 or 6 times, but like it was enjoyable to do it, was like you're reclaiming like a construction site and you start off with a sniper rifle on a building opposite it, and you have to take out like these 4 snipers, and then you go in like guns blazing to take out the rest of them, and it was really fun. But that was like one in of maybe like 3 in the entire time I played really good shootouts, and the rest were just really dull. The game, I think the gunplay in it is quite good, but I can't compare it to the other ones. What do you guys think of the actual like gun mechanics and shooting mechanics in it?
Yeah, I enjoyed them, to be honest. I think between, just trying to think of the gunplay in 5 as well.
5 evolved it another bit. It got a bit more cover shooty, even though that's an element in 4. But it's definitely a huge progression for like San Andreas and all like that.
Oh, massive!
Rudimentary shooting mechanics.
Was there auto aim in 4?
There's kind of a loose auto aim.
It's
it's similar to Red Dead Redemption, where like if you kind of get close to a character, then it'll lock on.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because I loved the shooting in Red Dead 1. Yeah, I think I'm just trying to think back because it has been a while since I played the game, but I enjoyed it. Yeah, I wouldn't say like it was top tier, but I wouldn't say it was bad either, you know.
I did like, there were certain elements that were cool that I wish they brought forward. Like there was your targeting reticule had the enemy's health within it and stuff like that, which made it very
That's true,
fun.
yeah.
And like there was just something snappy and fun about it, and all the guns felt and sounded really good in the game. I have to say, like the sound design and all like that, and the physics, and like that's where the physics engine comes into its own with the ragdoll physics, like shooting the gun out of a guy's arm, or like seeing the body crumple in a realistic way, or the way explosions just send debris flying everywhere in like a very realistic manner. Like all that stuff was like mind-blowing at the time, really.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so this game, when this came out, it was like had an amazing critical response to it. Like it got 10 out of 10s from loads of publications, and just like really high 90s scores and stuff. Looking back now, do you think why do you think people jumped at that, especially after everything we've said about, players' expectations being, not met when the game came out and stuff. Do you think people just kind of saw the generation leap and, our critics saw the generation leap and jumped at it? Oh my God, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think technically it's an amazing achievement. Like, it still looks pretty good today. And obviously all the physics engine stuff and different systems that are in the game are amazing, and the attention to detail is unbelievable. Like, some of the aspects that we don't think work are a little in hindsight as well. Like, we have to admit that. And maybe, now this is just a theory, but maybe at the time there was such a outpouring of praise from critics is because it took itself seriously in some ways, and it tried to tell a more quote unquote adult story. And there could be, maybe at the time, and maybe there still is, a bit of a, sensitivity with games and like people who work in games about it being like for kids. And when something comes out which tries to be adult and tries to be, unsuccessfully in some ways, but tries to tell that sort of story and takes a swing for something a bit different, maybe they wanted to reward that and think, okay, here's the Godfather of video games, where it's just like a proper serious gangster story, and like, this isn't your grandma's Grand Theft Auto, But
I feel like you say that in every podcast. I don't know why.
Yeah, like you and Donkey Konga.
I agree with you. Yeah, I think a lot of critics were really just like blown away by like the extremely high production values just the story being as mature as it is. It's interesting that like in hindsight, we're like, the gameplay and the story, like the way you play the game versus the story itself, clash so much that like, for me at least, and I think you as well, Michael, it really brings it down. But like, I think at the time people were just so dazzled by this notion of like, super serious HBO, like intense, resonating cultural moment in gaming, that they were just like, wow. And also the fact that just the sheer amount of stuff they crammed into the game, like, it's very, I think at that moment in time, it'd be very hard to give a game with so much to offer a low score, because like, even if you don't like playing it one way, you can play it a different way and have a lot of fun with it, so it's in a way at the time, I'm like, yeah, I can see how you could give it a high score. For me personally, I disagree with it, but I can 100% concede why people would do it at the time.
Yeah, totally. I'd agree with you there. But seeing when Grand Theft Auto 5 came out, and then so many people were like, when you compare that to 4, so like nobody wanted to go back and play 4 then. Do you know, it was all about 5. Do you think, and I'm kind of coming up to the main question on the podcast now, but do you think it still deserves, I guess, the rating that it has compared to 5? Because I mean, 5 is like nowhere near it on the list, really.
Well, it's still
pretty close.
It's pretty high up on the list, but it's not in the top 3, which is fair to say, or the top 5. I think 5 is in the top 10, which is still pretty high.
It's still a good bit.
But why is 4 above 5? I guess. I don't know. 5 has its flaws, and like it has more of a mass appeal thing going on. Like, they saw the big bucks with 5. Not that they weren't making something like Grand Theft Auto 4 sold like millions and millions of copies, obviously. And I'm not saying they made like some art house, experience that threw out all the rules, but they did take more risks with 4, and that's admirable. If I had to boot up one to play now, I'd probably just mess around, play 5. But 4 does have a lot of good things going on in it as well. In terms of its place in the list, though, I do feel a little differently about it. Because like, one common thing that's come up with, so we had Ocarina at 1 and Tony Hawk's at 2. We talked about the influence these games had and how they shaped gaming afterwards. So Ocarina of Time had like a huge influence on the medium. Tony Hawk's had a bit of a fad, a bit of explosion of like similar games coming out, but not quite the same influence. Grand Theft Auto 4 isn't the Grand Theft Auto that had the biggest influence. That's Grand Theft Auto 3. That game like changed games. Like, we're still living in the era of Grand Theft Auto 3 in some ways. 4, I think, definitely was another huge step up for open world games and sort of perfected some of the things that they were trying to do in terms of immersion, but I don't think open world games have gone in a lot more user friendly direction since then.
I do think it probably set the benchmark for its generation when it came to open world games, maybe.
Yeah, in some ways.
Because it was such a leap from the previous entries in terms of like technology and graphics and stuff, you know.
My main issue would be that like all the innovations that Grand Theft Auto 4 brought to the table are all ones that I think most people would perceive as negative innovations that like we generally don't use anymore, or if we do, people tend just not to be thrilled with them. Like the whole idea of these like meaningless side quests, like again, the good word that you use there, Michael, it's not really user friendly. It's not like allowing you to have the most fun. And like the realism is a thing that like has its place, but not in a Grand Theft Auto game. Like I actually think this would work very well as a more straightforward first person shooter or something. I think that could potentially be fantastic. But because like it's supposed to be a playground, I think my main issue with it is just that it doesn't marry the game concept and like the narrative well together. That's my main issue. Like there's two very good games in here, but mash them together and you're bringing both of them down. So I definitely would not, I do not think this should be as high as it was. In fact, like two people who I mentioned this before is like, oh yeah, I'm playing Grand Theft Auto 4 because like it's the highest Grand Theft Auto game on Metacritic. And both of them were like, that can't be right. That can't be the best one. Like neither of them believe like Grand Theft Auto 4 was the highest one, but yeah.
Yeah, it does seem straight, and that's getting on to our question. Like, does it deserve its Metacritic rating really, or its place on the list? And yeah, I don't know that it does, to be honest. Like for me, it's definitely a strange one to like. I do love that game, and it's one of my favorite Grand Theft Autos, but I don't think it deserves to be that high on the list of like all games, all time.
Yeah.
You know?
Just to point out as well, weirdly, a weird thing about the Metacritic list is that the 360 and PS3 versions are separate places. So Grand Theft Auto 4 is number 3 and 5 on the list. So it's like, it's really like shouldering into the top 5 there. Yeah, I would agree. Like it does have some really good elements in it. And like you're saying, at the time, I was somewhat disappointed because I was expecting a fun like Vice City and San Andreas type game, but the technical aspects of it are amazing, and it was that huge generational leap that you saw. It was sort of like the same thing I felt when I played Metal Gear Solid 2. I hated that I wasn't Solid Snake throughout most of that game, but like it looked so much better and had so much more like complicated systems than anything else on the PlayStation 2. It felt like this is the proper like next generation of games. This is like new and exciting, and that can sort of sweep you along sometimes. Yeah. So it's like I think this is definitely a case of at the time you can see why there was such a huge critical response to it, but time hasn't been as kind to it as you know, like Tony Hawk's we said still plays amazingly, whereas like there's certain elements of this which doesn't.
That's the thing, like how many people are going back now and playing Grand Theft Auto 4? Like what's its legacy, you know?
Yeah, true. Now, saying that, you pointed out something that there are people who prefer some of the elements in 4. Yeah. And they're like, if you put into like the YouTube search engine Grand Theft Auto 4 versus 5, you'll see that there's so many videos about the amount of detail and little elements that were taken out of 4.
That's true,
and that didn't make it to 5. So like the car handling and certain other like the ragdoll physics, immersive elements. Like one thing I forgot about 4 is that you can pick up objects on the ground and throw them, like bricks and stuff.
Oh right,
I completely forgot about that. It's like Steve said earlier, it's something like pretty useless and not used throughout the game, but like it was there and now it doesn't exist anymore. So we can definitely see how there was so much in 4.
There's actually still a pretty big modding community around 4 too.
I'm not surprised.
Like those reasons, yeah.
I think most of the people who seem to really, really like 4 and I suspect this might be yourself as well, Sean, are the people who have sunk a huge amount of time into it, like at least like 50 hours or something. And that makes me think, I think Grand Theft Auto 4 is just trying to employ Stockholm Syndrome more than anything else. Like, because look, and like, I'm being legit there, because like it puts so much into setting the tone that like, that can kind of override the flaws in the game, because it contributes to the tone. So like the more time you put into it, I think the more you would appreciate it. But as a pick up and play, like I would immediately go to Grand Theft Auto 5 as opposed to this.
Yeah, I'd agree. That definitely. It doesn't have the same appeal on first play, I think. Yeah.
Sorry, we're after ruining your favourite game for you, Sean.
It's not my favourite game. That's the Evil Within. What are you talking about? No, but
we can do that again if you like. Which is better, this or the Evil Within?
The Getaway Black Monday.
The ear graphics.
No, okay. So I think we're kind of all in unanimous agreement then that we don't really think it deserves its spot.
Probably not. Like, it's a huge game. Like, it's not like a horrible game by any means, but just like the third best of all time. Like,
it seems pretty crazy.
It's crazy. Fuck up. And we're going to be coming up against this a lot in the list. Actually, we're going to be like, what the fuck is this doing here?
Yeah, I think we've hit our first one where it's like, yeah.
But you know, some cool element. It's got the best fucking theme song of any game ever. Okay, play that bass line again. There you go. Thanks, Vinny.
Yeah, cool. So Grand Theft Auto 4, I think, you know, definitely has its own legacy, I suppose, you know, and it's kind of loved and hated for various reasons. But there you go. I think who shall I turn to tell us about our next game on the list?
So that's myself.
What's behind the velvet curtain, Steve?
So for number 4 on Metacritic, and I know you all know this is coming, it's the one you've been waiting for this entire time, for the Sega Dreamcast, Soul Calibur.
What?
And I know there's some people out there saying like, what people out there are waiting, is like, okay, what's it really going to be? But legitimately, number 4 on the list is Sega Dreamcast Soul Calibur, which is a bit mind-blowing because
that's crazy.
I have no idea why. Like, I've never played it before, but like I've heard nothing about that game, so I don't know why it's so high.
Well, guys, tune into the next episode to find out why.
Also tied for second place, I must say.
Yeah, we got a lot around the 98 mark.
Grand Theft Auto 4 again at 98. It's tying with itself.
Like, that's how good it is.
I think they're just rounding that up, though. Like there is probably like places, because like they're taking so many like reviews into account and so many numbers, they're just kind of rounding it up.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Cool, guys. Well, is there any closing statements about Grand Theft Auto 4, or have we kind of said what we want to say on it?
Fuck that driving, man.
Yeah, fuck the driving. Yeah, it's bad. We've sort of skirted around it, Sean, but shit. Like, it's really bad driving.
I hated it so much. So fuck that driving.
Cool. Well, thanks all for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye-bye.
Look.